Wildcards actually began out of a role-playing game that we were playing as I said, in one of my other sessions here. We were playing a superhero role-playing game, and it became addictive, and we wasted like a year and a half on it, and we finally said, we got to figure a way to get some money out of this, so we made it a shared world anthology, and, 30 years later, it's still going strong, so we
exactly 30 years later now,
came up with something pretty cool there.
Yeah, that amazes me. 22 books in, 23rd book coming out later this year.
And 3 more just signed, so.
Excellent. Still with Tor?
Tor, yeah. Fantastic.
But keeping that large of a group of authors and that large of a universe and that many characters going, the Wildcard Trust must have been very important in that. How did you set that up?
Well, I was fortunate in that by the time we came up with Wildcards, there was several other shared world anthologies going, and I don't know if there's a lot of young people here, disgusting young people, but you may not remember the 80s, but in the late 80s, the shared world anthology was very trendy. There was a series called Thieves World that Robert Lynn Aspirin and Robert Aspirin and Lynn Abbey edited together, and that was very, very popular. It actually began as an argument in the bar at a Worldcon about who would win, Conan or Elric, and from the desire to see these great heroes in the same universe together, meeting each other, and they invented this fantasy shared world, Thieves World, that it was so popular that everybody started doing shared world anthologies, and Thieves World was the most successful, but there was also Leovac, and there was Ithcar, and there was Heroes in Hell, and there was War World, and yada yada. Greystone Bay, there were horror shared worlds and science fiction shared worlds and fantasy shared worlds, and we did the superhero shared world. But we were like number 6 in this trend here, and so therefore I was able to talk to Aspirin and Abbey in Thieves World and find out all the horrible things that had gone wrong with that book, and they weren't prepared. Since they were the pioneers, they didn't know the kind of problems that could arise, and they had to fix them retroactively, and they'd come up with this master agreement. Finally, they had to pay lawyers, many tens of thousands of dollars to draw up for them because, and we were able to get their master agreement for free, and I essentially just copied it with a few twists, and we started out on a sound basis, unlike Thieves World, and we didn't have the problems they had. So it was their generosity and the willingness to share, so we wouldn't fall down the same rabbit holes and break our legs, that helped us keep Wildcards together, and we had our rules firmly in place from the beginning. The thing is that writers, writers are all strange, contradictory creatures. On one sense, they're all immense egomaniacs, and on the other hand, they're also massively insecure. And you get the two contradictory sides, flipping them, and when they're in a book with other writers, where your characters are meeting their characters, everybody is identifying with their characters and wanting to win. And if you don't have the rules set out very quickly, as happened in Thieves World, you get a series of endless one-upmanships, where people not necessarily working together but competing with each other. And Thieves World had a very simple, a shared world. The whole premise is you're sharing the world with, and your character can meet their character, and you can use their characters in your stories. So Thieves World had a rule, is that you could not kill anyone else's named character. That was their rule. You can use everybody else, all the other writers in the book, you can use their characters, but you cannot kill anyone else's named character. Which is fine as far as it goes, but it doesn't go far enough, because when the writers got it to feeling pissy and competitive, you had things like, my character kidnaps your character and chops off your character's arms and legs. See, I didn't kill them. So I'm within the rules. I can do that. And now you have a character who has no arms and legs. Or there was a character, Robert Aspirin's own character, the editor of the anthology, had a character who was like the head of the mafia in the city where Thieves' World was set. You know, he had these army. He was the chief of the criminal underworld, and he had like 1,000 hawk masks. Those were his foot soldiers. They wore hawk masks, and they enforced his rule. So, one of the other writers killed all of the hawk masks, all like 1,000 of them, because they weren't named characters, you see. So now you're the head of the mafia, but there is no mafia. You're Don Corleone, but you got no one to give orders to. So this is the kind of crap that the Thieves' World guys were always doing to each other, and it doesn't necessarily produce for the best of fiction, and it led to a lot of conflict in the group. So since they shared all these stories with us, we were able to set up rules that prevented that and kept Wildcard on a saner course.
How do you go about plotting one of your 3-book series on that?
Well, we come up with a general idea, and then I kind of refine that idea, and I lay out what we call the overplot, which is the plot that unifies all 3 books, and that will run through it. And then I call for stories, and I have like 40 writers in a consortium. I only put 8 stories in a book, so people pitch me ideas, and I say, yeah, this one will fit with that one, will fit with that one, and I put them together, and then the people whose stories don't fit, I don't buy their stories for that book. So
the last few years, you've added some new authors to the group.
And we're going to continue to do that.
How do you pick and choose who's going to be part of the project?
I try to pick, good writers who, number one, who I think can work well with others. That's a big criteria for Wildcard, because as Thieves will prove, there are some writers who can't work well with others, who are best just left to write their own books, and we can enjoy them, but don't ask them to try to play with any of the other children. And also we want writers who love superheroes, comic books. Someone who's always had a frustrated desire to be Stan Lee is usually a good thing, but at the same time want to bring their own thing to it, and who has some. We don't want to pick someone who hasn't sold any stories or someone who sold 1 story. We want people who have at least some sort of a name, who can hopefully bring us new readers. I'm a fan of Harry, and now Harry's writing for Wildcard, so I'll check out this Wildcard thing. So they bring new readers into it, and the series grows in that manner.
I know Neil Gaiman tells a story about pitching a character to you for Wildcards and having it turned down.
Yeah. That was right at the beginning of the series, and nobody knew he was Neil Gaiman yet. He was just this weedy British kid dressed all in black, and he came up and he pitched me this Sandman character, and I said, no, we got enough writers, thank you. So I blew off Mr. Gaiman, but that was probably a mistake.
He can laugh about it now, though.
Yeah. It was actually probably the best thing I could have done him, because Wildcard's as successful as it is, doesn't approach the success of Sandman, and had he written a series of short stories for me for the Wildcard series, he might not be Neil Gaiman today.
Yeah. I mentioned how vast the Wildcards world is. 22 books now, and it spans the globe, and there are hundreds of characters, and you have the same issue with Westeros. So many characters and so much going on and so much history. How do you keep track of this? What do you use for your Bible?
Yeah, I mean, we do have reference books, and of course I have files on a computer and all that, but an awful lot of it is just in my head.
I know that both sources have large wikis online. Do you go to that yourself?
I don't. I'm old school, so all this wiki stuff is foreign to me. I'd left to my own devices, I'd still be tying messages to the legs of ravens.
How much research goes into one of your projects?
Well, it depends on the project. Westeros, of course, I've always been a fan of history, and I read a lot of history. I've always read a lot of history, so that's what it's based on, and I research particular points if I need particular points. Now, something like Wildcard, for example, Inside Straight, one of the Wildcard books had large sequences in Egypt. So I did a fair amount of research about Egypt and its geography and its cities and, where the dams were and, maps and et cetera, to make sure as editor everybody was kind of on the same page there.
For something like Ice and Fire, do you go so far into research that you work out the orbital dynamics of the planet to figure out how winter falls? Okay. That's
magic.
Probably good. It's magic.
Magic.
That's good.
Fantasy, magic.
So it's a magic winter, not a science winter.
That's right.
That actually tells us a lot.